Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican, running for Mayor of Abbotsford to bring the RCMP in, its investigations team, and to go and forensic audit the city of Abbotsford. Unless my Conservatives leader, Peary, gets in and does it for Abbotsford Conservatives and for Abbotsford community. Only one more day to go before the big election day on Monday. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I was asked to do a podcast and elaborate, so I want to elaborate. First, before I go any further, I would like to show you the 100% proof of this. That is Ed Fast, the sitting MP, still till Monday when his ass gets handed to him. He says in his Facebook, added that Abbotsford Langley, two Conservative candidates, Mike de Jong is the one that showed up in supporting Mike de Jong. Let's understand what is taking place here. There is not two candidates running for the Conservative Party. Mike de Jong had never been cleared to run for the Conservative Party, and Ed knows that. Ed falsified followers on his Facebook, and you could see the comments. People are saying, yes, I'm backing Mike now. You could see that on Ed's Facebook. He falsified, tricking people that Mike is a Conservative. So if you're voting for Mike, you're voting for Conservatives. He's using that logo. This is a loss of opportunity, and it's also using the brand of the federal Conservatives for a Liberal that is not cleared to run. That will allow the candidate and the Conservative Party to sue Ed's ass, and that has to be done because this is a democracy. These men been cheating through Abbotsford and cheating unbelievable to get Mike de Jong in. When I started my journey, it was on words of Braun opening his mouth. Henry Braun was the engine and the mob leader of Abbotsford, controlling our local police, threats, land, development, lobbying jobs with his partners. By a few words out of an individual's mouth, Braun, who was Henry's son in the city, when we walked in on a negligence claim knowing the mayor should happen, Braun opened that mouth. With my knowledge and past history of former cities, I knew it was against the law, and I went to the best man, because Braun said because to the Abbotsford police, Bob Rich and Mike Sears will shut him down and probably jail him for my dad. I went to the RCMP and knew Henry controlled a little mob in Abbotsford called the Abbotsford Police. Braun took me on a journey showing how Henry was tied to Rick Rakes, the pro editor, how Tyler Olson got ghostwriting done from Rick Rakes through and Vicky Hopes and everything to keep the newspaper for Abbotsford community. He did damage control through the newspaper all the time. But he used the newspaper to scandal people and targeted people. When Henry tried it with Vicky Hopes with me, it was the RCMP admission said she's directly doing that for Henry Braun to shame you in the general public so you walk away. I want to say before I go any further, I want to say Abbotsford residents, and especially me, owe the mission RCMP men and women that are about law enforcement, about ethics, morals, and a democracy, and everybody the chance to freedom. Along this journey, you saw my cameras and everything smashed. I don't believe it was done in haste by the Abbotsford Police. I believe it was Henry Braun sending him out to do it before I could reach a location and show the general community what was taking place. I want to tell you, how far will you go to stay out of prison? Henry Braun has to go before a court and a jury. That I can tell you. And nobody's going to stop me on this quest. Not Henry's army, not Henry's friends. I told you at the end of it all, when Braun showed me, they would have to surface. Strap the Abbotsford Police from Henry Braun. Henry didn't have muscle to use the task force to threaten no more. Now Henry's got to show everybody that did the back work and dirty work come to the thing. I believe Henry Braun's running around pleading on everybody, please, please help me, emptying the safe that Olenoff said he had millions of dollars, and please, please help me. The same as Abbotsford community begged on the Mission RCMP that we were going to be framed by Henry Braun and his establishment. Henry lost great respect when he tried to kick shit out of Trudeau. It was about the money and jobs. He was fast-tracking jobs. Henry took the majority of council for the community plan, and he was ramming it through, and he was telling his friends to buy like Rom Funk, the partners. Henry had these people doing strange and heinous acts. At all times, I never once turned away from the man that caused it and was the engine, Henry Braun. Henry used Ross, and I know to stay focused on Henry. He used Dave Sadu, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He used Marcus Dalvis, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He used the Abbotsford Police, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He used Keelan Olenoff, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He used Vicky Hopes, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He used Ed Fast, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He used Mike DeYoung, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He used George Peary, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He used city councillors, I knew to stay focused on Henry. He's the engine of it all and never let go. Lock in and lock in tight. Henry's got one missing from the team. One more, right, Henry? And that is Darryl Plunkett, the Liberal. So let me begin. When I told you there was 4 leaders, they now put John Van Dongen on the Capriccia newspaper. This looks to me like a photobomb picture, because that's not what John Van Dongen looks like, George Peary looks like, Ed Fast, or Henry. Henry's really scared looking. Stress will do that to you. Now I'm going to tell you a little story. George Peary, and you can ask this clearly to George Peary's wife, and you can ask it to every. George Peary is a solid Liberal. This man that owns this newspaper with his son is a city councillor, Dave Sadu. Andy Sadu told me when Dave Sadu put him in trouble, George Peary is a solid Liberal, BC Liberal. He should never be in a picture if Mike's claiming that he is a conservative, period. He's a solid Liberal. He was the man at Roseland's Cafe when Simon held the party, cut bags with his friends and gouged the eyes out, so in a brown bag, because he was mad Andrew Wilkinson was getting a nomination and not Mike. How does Peary land in this picture? Henry's desperate. I saw Henry go beside Bruce Banman on the Chamber of Commerce, and he was trying to get Bruce Banman to win him over. Bruce would never sell his soul. Bruce would give up office before he would sell his soul and do an unduty deed for money. Henry is stuck, and he's panicking and he's shitting his drawers. Ed Fast went as far as saying the conservative Mike DeYoung, there's 2 candidates to trick the voters, fraud the voters, mislead the voters, and everything. I told you Henry ran the whole city because Darren Brown showed me. I showed you the illegal signs, I showed you the Chamber of Commerce and everyone. We shouldn't look away from people like Dave Sadu that took an oath and that did this. We shouldn't look away from people like Greg Toes and Alex Mitchell. We shouldn't look away. They should have stopped Henry when he was asking them to do favors. One more is missing, John, and that is Darryl Plunkett. Ed Fast, George Peary, Henry Braun, and John Van Dongen. Now let me tell you about John Van Dongen. You want to hear about John Van Dongen? John Van Dongen I don't think would ever endorse Mike DeYoung. George Peary and Mike DeYoung made asshole remarks about John Van Dongen when he was in government that he got so many speeding tickets they humiliated him. So I knew John for a long time that John would never cross this way. So either this is photobombed or John had to receive a brown envelope. Not only that, let me tell you this. Darren Brown showed me that it was Mike DeYoung and Henry Braun that got Kelly Shahal to tell that John Van Dongen was having an affair with his secretary and caused his marriage. Now, that's how you get it from the horse's mouth. And John Van Dongen knows that George Peary is a solid Liberal. He's more Liberal than Mark Carney. He's more Liberal than Justin Trudeau. This is Henry Brown's desperate attempt, and he's begging on everybody. And I'm watching him squirm with Abbotsford residents. The city, he frauded out of our bank accounts. He used councils to pass the decision. He knows at the end of this, it's orchestrated crime. It's fraud on Abbotsford taxpayers. He used positions to enrich himself and his friends. And let me tell you, Martha Stewart went to jail in this. This man wrote this article out of the Capriccio newspaper knowing that George Peary's a liberal and he shouldn't be there. He knew this about John Van Dongen and John Van Dongen's marriage, how John Van Dongen hated Mike, hated Henry, and hated them all because they wrecked his marriage. They teased him about them tickets and everything else. How did they cross Jan Van Degen? Or how did they get Eric Nivel? How would Nivel ever give what Henry did to him back? The only man that's holding true right now, two of them, is Darrell Plunkett. Plunkett was the one that we first went to see when he was the Speaker of the House, and he got us lawyers to sue Henry and go after Mike. That was his riding and what he was looking away from. They need to cross Darrell Plunkett in that meet. But there's Bruce Bamman yet. There's only 2 men missing out of Henry's loading his team. No more police force for Henry Brown, risking jail the rest of his life for attempted murder in the car that he ran me over with, asking an Abbotsford police chief to cover his crime, asking the police chief to stalk me and threaten me with the task force so he could stay in to finish the term to load all the plans and community plans and Rob Funk's jobs in the business community plan. You saw the big leaders pull out of Abbotsford. He knows this young Suk Mangel is the only qualified candidate for the federal Conservatives. I showed you how Vicky Hopes targeted him recklessly, and that would show prosecutors that Henry had to be using Vicky Hopes to screen everything and deflect everything from the law and cover it up and shame people from standing up for the principles of the law so they would be leaving town. And this was Henry, and that is why Henry brought the newspaper on board. So I'm going to tell Dave Sadu. I want you to listen, Dave, when your dad and mom brought me here and cried that you did that at UFV and threw all my stuff as mayor and you could wreck their lives, and that they were selling their property on Tracy Road and getting a new house. I knew it was a perk. Nobody would have did this in an election. And asked me that to forgive you for your mistake. No, Dave, you haven't learned the lesson. The law's got to punish you. You took an oath, you swore an oath, people's lives were threatened, a private police that's supposed to go after gangs was used to go after residents, a criminal went into the city to enrich and aid himself, had his son in front of him, had counsel in front of him, scam jobs. And let me tell you, Dave, you're a sitting council, right? And you could see Dave Lowens is doing everything, not the mayor, Ross Siemens. He's the new police building that we scammed for the $71 million, and don't forget the cost overruns that the taxpayers got to be burdened that whoever signed off with no investigation. Dave Sadu's talking about that. And Dave Lowens is running them odds. 1 man missing, and that is Darrell Plunkett. But I'm going to tell you, everybody knows that George Peary should not be in that picture. Everybody knows. So when Mike said, and Ed Fast said, and Abbotsford News said, and everybody said, and Simon Gibson said, Mike was a fiscal conservative and always been it. Never was a conservative. A conservative would respect that Pierre Poilievre put a candidate forward for Canadians to become prime minister and would never undermine or run as an independent or split the votes or do this. Henry used to play both sides. He did it to Juddy Sadu, and I saw him. He did it to Pam. Now Henry's flushed to the top. But ladies and gentlemen, let me make this clear. I stand today without the Abbotsford police smashing my cameras, inflating speeding tickets so I pull out of town. That was all Henry's orders. I stand a free man. I stand out in Abbotsford to be your voice, to show the scamming and everything, and I learned that from Henry's son. There's no other way you can get them doors open. And everything I took you on this journey, I want to make sure that I made it for the law so they could prosecute Mr. Millionaire. Henry Brown got in his car after we were protesting at the city about our houses, knowing that Ed and Mike were up his backside so far, believing that they were untouchable for prosecution and rigging in the community police department. They covered it, knowing that Henry now should have been called out and he should have been charged. He came after he asked the Abbotsford police to remove the protest, which we left peacefully, uptown in his Lexus car, and came right at me. His intent was to run me over, then use his friends here in this picture and the police department to say I jumped in front of the car and get Henry off the murder charges. It backfired on Henry. We left peacefully and Henry came to that scene. When Henry hit and ran me, put me in the hospital, I limped around for 2 months. The Abbotsford police chief covered it and he figured he would flee. Ed and Mike covered it and they figured they would do it. The Abbotsford police said, go stick it up your ass, we're not charging our boss. The RCMP said, make recommendations to your lawyers and that will go behind that. I knew that Henry was owning the private police and he bought himself out. Henry was then moving job sites, and what Henry never knew, I had his son in my hand, Henry. I had his son in my hand. Henry believes, with all the cheating what you've seen, even behind BC elections and Elections Canada and everything, if we can get Mike Jong in, boys, we could seal it. You imagine that you promised developers the community plan. When I ran for the mayorship, I knew with the RCMP and Bill Vanderzand, the Manji Soy would become the mayor. Henry would have to throw everything at me, just like he's doing this candidate, in order to halt me because he needed Ross Siemens in. You can see him throwing everything, even with Ed Fast, at the Conservative candidate, undermining the party, Mike splitting the party and everything else, and Mike saying he's a Conservative. A Conservative would never split the vote. They would do what Steve Schaefer didn't give up. He's throwing everything because he needs to know them. He needs to save Ron Funk from financials audits, the Cacaro Ranch that says it's coming soon, how Abbotsford First was involved in it. I want to make clear that Bruce Bamman, the councillor, when he was a councillor, was clear of it. Mogill said there was smoke, there was fire. He knew Henry was going too far. They were scared of Henry's abuse of power that he had behind the scenes with Ed Fast, Mike DeYoung, and the Abbotsford Police. I can tell you now, ladies and gentlemen, the Abbotsford Police have distanced themselves from Henry, knowing what took place. But I still keep it in my back of my mind, knowing they were in front of my jobs and how they threatened. Henry will go through anything. He has a chance, and he faces that chance of what he did in the city. He abused the city chair. He loaded jobs. He was in conflict of interest with his son. He collaborated with the city councils. He used electoral to steal people's signs, to load elections. He used the newspaper to bribe. He blocked this. He used candidates or city councillors to rig and false and help him. Dave Sadu, his dad, who owns the Capritra newspaper, who begged on me, knows that George Peary shouldn't be on the front of a picture because he's a liberal. These are mutts. Mutts. Mutts will run with mutts, the farmers say. All the farmers say these four are mutts. Mutts will lay with mutts. They're not true, meaning they're not a purebred German Shepherd. They're just mutts. And mutts will do anything. But make it clear, Henry Braun is the engine and the mob leader and the leader of it all. He stands to lose it all and everything. He will beg and beg and beg and beg, and you could see him getting skinny. You could see it. You saw him trying to get to Bruce. You saw him trying to get to Corky. You could see everything. He's throwing everything at the Conservative candidate. At Clark Freightways, I told Pierre Polliot, assure you, if Steve Schaefer gets it, if any Conservative gets it, we will make sure that we look out for our grassroots Conservative and hold them true. Henry knew the pastor of the church that he knocked the house off, the East Indian lady he called the dumb brown cow, and all them residents were too much. Henry Brown tried to end my life. Henry Brown rigged elections. He uses these four men, except for Darrell Plunkett, who got us the lawyers and got us started, in this, saying they're community leaders. They're not. They're mutts. Make it clear, they're mutts. These are people's lives. I do not believe what I just told you on the story of John Van Dongen and Kelly Shahal and Mike DeYoung and everything, that picture of Van Dongen's true. Because at the night of the BC Conservatives election win, here in Abbotsford, when Bruce Bamman got a seat with Corky Neufeld, John Van Dongen stayed at the golf club with me and my sister and my brother-in-law till 2 o'clock in the morning, talking how much he hated Henry Braun. And there are 3 eyewitnesses, right, John Van Dongen? He said he's a piece of shit. He's undermining Abbotsford and Mike's worse. That's how I know. What did John Van Dongen swallow, like Eric Nivel? Why do you do this? Henry's life. Henry's life. Wouldn't you go through this to your life? Let me tell you what I did for my life. I pleaded on the RCMP that the Abbotsford police were under Henry's control. They were going to drug traffic me. They were impeding me to give me speeding tickets. They were doing everything. Henry's life. Job sites worth of millions. Henry was never compassionate about a resident or families. It was always the money. Greed got to him. He used his church. When he got Brenda Falk to write the hate list against Bruce Bannon, it was always unrevealing and unrevealing itself. The godly warrior wrote this. When he went at Mogale with the task force, when he did me. But Henry screwed up. He put his son there, and his son knew it all. And his son did this. So I want to make it clear to Dave Sadu. I want you to listen, Dave. Listen, counselors. Listen, Ross. You could see Ross Siemens. He's scared. Ross's dad came to me, Jake Siemens, and he knew this was going all the way. A fair man that had the only one out of the whole thing that had any balls knew that this should have been settled like man, and they should have beat the shit out of Henry and disowned him and called him out and let him go to jail. They didn't. Henry owned him. He put him under his thumbs. He thought he owned this town. He loaded his brother Irwin to the police board. You could see what he did with Mark Workentine and everything. There was no outrunning it. I told the RCMP when I sat down with him, you can't beat this one. You might as well just give me the key and confess. I stand on the world stage so the RCMP crime investigators can see it. Political leaders can see it. Investigators that Henry said the Abbotsford police will never investigate me or charge me can see it all. Go through your financials, see Ron Funka Diverse, and see all this that was done. And make sure that Abbotsford residents have a voice, have a democracy, and are free. I was pulled up, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to tell you, by the greatest man that ever served this country, the RCMP. They pulled me up and said, don't leave Abbotsford, Mr. Pelican. We're behind you. The residents are behind you. With what you told us about Darren Braun, we will help you. And all the way, they never once give up. To Dave Sadu, I would pack my shit and get out of Abbotsford very, 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 very fast. To Ross Siemens, I pack my shit and get out of Abbotsford very, 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 very fast. To Ed Fast, I pack my shit and get out of Abbotsford very, 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 very fast. To George Peary, I would just admit I'm a liberal and be done with it and say they used me. But to Henry Braun, I'd find a rock to hinder, because you are going to face what every criminal faces. What every criminal faces when they steal, when they commit fraud, when they pay off officials, when they try to commit murder, jail. And nobody gonna halt me. There's too many people that witnessed it, too many people. And I tell Vicky Hopes, she ain't gonna help you, Ken ain't gonna help you, nobody's gonna help you. You could see the great leaders of Abbotsford pulled out. That is how I knew they were going to come at Suk Mangel. That is how I knew they were going to slander Suk Mangel, target Suk Mangel, use everything. And Ed Fast now straps Suk Mangel of a loss of opportunity and a character assassination that the Conservative brand is backing Mike Jong, which is a lie. I would tell the Conservative candidate that's running, because Ed's pulling your votes illegally and criminally, you have enough to go at him and Mike Jong. With BC elections, more than enough. And you can go after that nice juicy house that Hen rushed through with him and go after Ed Fast like there's no tomorrow. To Pierre Poilievre, Abbotsford's calling upon you, if you're elected, to get the RCMP in here very, 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 very fast. Dave Sadu, I told your dad when he was crying at me and begging me of what you did. You were a fucking screw up. You wrecked people's lives, you played in an election, and Henry used you, and you will never learn your lesson. You will just go back and do it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Darren Braun showed me, block Manji Sohi to load Ross Siemens. They need to stop Mr. Pelican. And I told that to the RCMP, I told it to Bill Van Der Zan, and they said, run. create a platform and run. And we saw Henry sweat. Henry could not buy me. He will not buy me. He will not buy Bruce, I can tell you that. He will not buy honest, trustworthy people. Henry's money means shit to me, and it means shit to Abbotsford residents, but I tell you what means a lot to me, the law. To Henry Braun, this ain't gonna help you, Henry. Mike ain't gonna make it. Mike ain't gonna clean it. Mike's gone too far over. He was Attorney General. He was an MLA. He had an oath. He had everything. That's why the RCMP sent him to me. Getting him in and trying to elect him and then say when he's in, he's untouchable. You know what that'll do, Henry? It'll probably save him, but it won't save you. And Mike will probably come to me and say, let's cut a deal. I'm in now. Back off of me and we'll throw Henry in and we'll help you prosecute him. That's how Mike works. I'm live, Abbotsford residents, here at Dave Sidhu's Capriccio newspaper.